Who heard about Nest? Raise your hand. 1, 2, and that's it. The rest of you never heard of Nest? So I can say whatever I like. Who read the description for the meetup, for my talk? Who read the description? 1, 2. Great. I've got the freedom to do whatever I like. Let's get started. The Year of the Cat. Who knows this song by Rod Stewart? No one? No one?
Sing.
No. The Year of the Cat. No, 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 no. This is not important. This is me. Great picture of me. I'm doing a lot of stuff. I'm organizing React NYC, another great meetup in the community. Working at 500 Tech. That's my Twitter handle. So if you want to follow me, I promise you that you'll find a lot of interesting stuff. And I'm here today to talk about full stack web frameworks. What is a full stack web framework? Come on, give me an answer, and Yaakov gonna give you a book.
Full stack web framework is the one that has a front end and a back end, and also allows for routing.
So I'm gonna repeat your question. A full stack web framework is the framework that gives you like a solution for both the back end and the front end.
Yeah.
Who used the full stack web framework before? Which one?
Ember.
No, Ember. That's a front end framework. Which is kind of tricky because today's front end frameworks, it's like it gives you a feeling like that's a monster, like you can do anything. So sometimes we forget that there is no back end. Yeah.
Angular Universal.
Universal?
Like,
Oh, Angular Universal, yeah. But Angular Universal, actually, that's not a right definition for a full stack web framework because it's kind of a technique that enable us to render static pages from Angular. So I'm talking about if you're talking about classics, who's familiar with Rails or Django? You heard it. You heard it before, all right? Yeah, probably. Ruby on Rails and Django written in Python. They used to be like very popular. I think they're still very popular full stack web framework. I never used each one of them, so. But I'm familiar with the concept, and my last project I built with Ruby on Rails, which was very interesting experience in 2019 because you actually got one language, same patterns, same API, and you can build everything from the database to the view layer without even like switching the context or switching your state of mind, which is cool. All right. Who heard about Sails and Meteor? Few of you. So Sails, it's like Rails, but for JavaScript, and Meteor, it's both of them are. I think it was a nice try, for my opinion, yeah, to build a full stack solution in JavaScript, so you can actually build everything you need. You've got all the API, all the tools, the structure, a template language, query language, you name it, from the server side. Is there anyone here who never used Angular, like a non-Angular developer that just came here to hear what's going on? So how many of you are familiar with AngularJS? Raise your hand, just to know. Yeah, all right, like the first version. So probably you heard about Min, the Min stack. It was like very popular. It used to be a great buzzword. Maybe it's still. It stands for MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node. Yeah, like Node, Express, MongoDB, and Angular. Let's put all of them together and start to get an experience of working with JavaScript from the database to the view layer. But there's a problem with this. I mean, again, my opinions. And the problem is that you still need to switch the context, the way I see it. I mean, I work with Angular. All right? Let's talk about things that we like about Angular. So we probably like TypeScript, probably, because we're working with Angular and we use it, and we can switch. I can stop whenever I like, but TypeScript is an advantage. All the modules architecture, I see it as an advantage. I think that's the only framework currently that really give you a solid structure, a pattern, a structure. I mean, you can do it with other frameworks as well, but Angular, the modules in Angular, that's a thing. Dependency injection, providers, this whole familiar pattern, yeah, the stuff that we already know and love, or at least familiar with. The Angular CLI, pipes, guards, all this concept of like writing plain TypeScript classes and annotate them, and then you've got everything you need from the framework. Did I miss anything? I don't think so. Kind of. Is there anyone here who's not familiar with one of those terms? Don't be shy, raise your hand. All right. Which one, just out of curiosity? Pipes and guards. So you're not familiar with pipes and guards. All right. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but you should check it out. Pipes used on the template layer. If you're familiar with AngularJS, if you ever work with AngularJS, there is this concept of filter. When you got a value on your template and you want to parse it or format it in a different way, just for view. Guards, it's a router feature that enable you to guard a specific route. Like you've got a set of rules and you want to enable or disable the user to navigate to a certain page. Cool. So I'm not here to talk with you about Angular. I mean, my point is, what if I'm going to tell you that there is a framework? It's kind of the new kid in town, but it's getting very popular for the past, I think it's more than 2 years, but I'm not sure about it. Not too sure about it. Personally, I'm familiar with a creator who took all the things that we like from Angular and just said, all right, let's take the same concept and try to build a layer on top of Express. You heard about Express, I think. I mean, most of us heard about Express. I try to use a lot of Node frameworks. I'm a front-end developer, full-time front-end developer, but you know, I try because we know JavaScript and we want to be able to reuse our knowledge and the language. Again, I couldn't find a framework that didn't that I didn't have to switch the state of mind. All right, NestJS. This is the logo, and that's the reason I use this title for the talk, because the person who wrote this framework is got a thing with cats. That's the website. If you ever heard of it, yeah, you should give it a try. Well, let's go back to the slide just to talk a little bit about what is Nest. So Nest is a Node framework. It's a fully featured framework that enables you to build a backend, server-side, which means communicate with the database, write some logic, deal with routing, query, security, you name it. All right, everything you need. Very modular. And the thing about Nest, that the creator of Nest is a big fan of Angular. So he took the same patterns. It's not just the same language. It's actually the same patterns, the same ideas that we already know in Angular, and just implement it into a server-side framework. We're going to see a live demo real soon, because I'm not a big believer in just seeing slides, so don't worry about it. So if you take Angular, and if I'm going to convince you that Nest is pretty much the same as Angular, so you already know how to work with this, how to build server-side, let's take both of them together, and we can treat it as a full-stack web framework. And one of the sponsors of this meetup, the guys from Nerval, they've got an amazing tool that automates the process that enables you with one command line to build a workspace where both an Angular front end and a Nest backend can live together and share the same resources. So you don't even need to deal with configuration, and you've got the whole deal. We're not going to see these tools specifically today, and we're going to save it to you. All right? How do we start a new Angular app? That's a question. Who wants to win a book? Not my book. Yaakov's book. Engine U. All right? ng-new, and then we can name the project, and we know that we're going to get it like pre-configured, yeah, everything we need. So let's do this. Let's build a server. Let's use, instead of ng, let's use nest. Nest new. Let's call our app, I don't know, let's call it, let's just call it Nest API. So the first time you're seeing this, this framework at work, it already feels a little bit familiar, because just like Angular, even the same command, I can use whatever npm or yarn, which package manager I want to use, and basically that's it. I've got a scaffold project with everything I need. It's going to take less than a minute, and then we can launch the project. Sounds good? We haven't seen anything, so of course it sounds good. All right. Look at this diagram. How many of you are familiar with this? That's it? Angular modules, all right? The whole concept of let's build modules, let's build a module per feature. Let's pack together all of our providers, components, pipes, or whatever together in a reusable piece of code we call a module that we can isolate, we can compose together. You can think about it, it depends on your background, but you can think about it as a jar, even some people feel comfortable to compare it to a DLL. If you go back far, right? Yeah, you've got a package. You've got a reusable piece of code. This is Angular. Apparently, this is Nest as well. 2 more slides, because I'm gonna show you a server-side framework. I tried to sketch something. Like there's a user which interact with the front end. In Angular, the front end is our UI components. So the user interact within the UI components, which triggers some DOM events, and it gets back a rendered template. Sounds reasonable. Now, if I take the same concept and think about a server side, I'm just going to change the name of the component for a controller. So I can think about it the same way, but now I've got an HTTP request. Instead of a component, I've got a controller. I'm going to hit the controller and get data back. So if I use Angular terms, that's only the controller is the exception. And it's used to call the component in NestJS, which we're going to see in a second. So I've got a component, I've got a service, I've got a controller, I've got a service. I've got the same API, everything wrapped together inside modules, and I think it's time for a live demo. So I've got an app. Let's take this Nest API and see how it looks like. Web store. Yep, I should have launched it before. Save us some time. Nest API. Let's make it larger. All right. I'm going to hit the source folder where you're going to find, if you have no idea that we're talking about an old framework, you can easily be mistaken and think that's an Angular app, because you've got an app module and you've got an app service, and the only thing that looks a little bit different is this app controller instead of component, because we don't have any UI components. So if I just jump right in, let's have a look of how a module looks like. So we're going to go through the code. We import the module, app controller, and app service. We've got import, so we can import other modules. We can compose modules together. We've got controllers instead of components, and we've got a service. Pretty much familiar. Let's dive even deeper. Let's look at a component. Let's look at a class that's called controller. Here we've got dependency injection. I'm injecting the app service. I've got a simple method, and I'm just decorated with a get. So this is a thick layer of abstraction, but I mean, it is a thick layer of abstraction on top of Express.js. But if you peek into the source code, you discover that it's not that big deal. You just decorated and add some metadata that operates. It's like manipulate Express.js underneath. So you've got a solid node framework, just nice abstraction on top of it. Let's make it work. One. npm start. We've got a server up and running. I'm going to hit the browser. There's a strange echo. Sorry for it. Localhost 3000. And we've got hello world. All right? Straightforward. Pretty much straightforward. Go back to the code. This is my controller. I just decorated with get, so I'm reacting to a get method. I've got this app service injected. If I look at the get hello, I see it just returning a string. Just for the, just for fun, let's return something else, like message hello world. Now, if you listen to Yaakov, you know what's wrong with us. If you haven't listened to Yaakov, don't get mad on me, but I'm going to do this. Just for now, promise. All right? Everything going to be typed. The rest of the demo is strictly typed. All right? So I changed the service. It returns something else. Go back to the browser, and I'm getting a JSON. Cool. Don't be mistaken. That's not a toy. It is actually, this framework is being, there's a lot of contributors. There's an amazing work on it. It's fully tested, fully documented, getting popular, issues being solved. Let's try to build something, because if you're gonna build a server-side app, first we wanna connect with the database. Otherwise, what's the point? All right. Second, we wanna see if we can leverage our existing knowledge with Angular and build something more modular to get a sense of how it looks like. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to get fancy. I'm not going to try anything, too sophisticated, because we're going to focus on the API. So let's say I want to build a feature. This feature is going to handle tasks, because I'm building some kind of a support app or whatever. All right. So just like I can do ng generate module, I'm going to nest generate module. I'm going to give a name for this module. So let's just call it tasks. I'm going to hit enter. You're going to get, guess what, an Angular module, an empty one, which I can go to my app module and just import it. It's already imported. Inside of my task module, I'm going to generate a controller, ng generate controller, ng. That's not going to be ng. It's going to be nest. Yeah, makes sense. What name would you like to give your controller? Let's call it tasks. All right? I've got a task controller. We're done dealing with templates or CSS, so it's pretty much straightforward. Let's go into the task controllers. And now you see that inside of the controller decorator, you can actually give the name for the path. So if I'm going to hit tasks, let's do like say hello, or I'm going to return all tasks. Let's return just an empty array with a task. I want it to respond to a GET request, so I'm going to decorate it with GET. And basically, that's it. Let's give it a try. So the whole concept of routing in NestJS is based on those decorators. So you can create a controller, you can pass a string, which path you wanted to get, and that's it. You can even pass strings into the get matrix itself, and Nest is going to build the routing system on top of it. So I'm going to try to hit slash tasks, all right, to get an empty array with a task. Easy as that. So I've got a module, I've got a controller, I can work my way out. Any questions up until now? Who find it like, I don't know, nice? Just to know, because if most of you find it boring, I'm going to switch subject. I've got tons of things that I can talk about. I think it's exciting. You can't tell because I'm tired, but I think it's exciting. Deep inside, I'm excited. Let's move forward. Now, but I asked before, yeah. Multiple GET requests for controller, yeah. And how it's going to look like this. O2 GET. Now you want to distinguish between the both. So here you can say like GET, I don't know, O, or even give it a, GET with an ID. You can create as much methods as you like, and you can map GET, you can map post, you can map delete. All right? Answer your questions? How do I call GET? Sorry, I couldn't. This one? How do I call him? Yeah. How do I call a GET with a parameter? That's the question? You're gonna say it in a second when we get a complete example, all right? So just to to enjoy the structure, because we've got a module, we've got a controller. Excuse me, I'm going to delete the test, but just like Angular, you've got a test pretty much configured, and it's going to be much easier because you don't need to compile any template, you don't need to take care of CSS. But I'm going to remove it just for the sake of the demo. The last thing I'm missing here is the service, because just like Angular, I've got a component which is my user interface. It's going to interact with some singleton to get some data, some kind of a provider, and that's the pattern, that's the structure. So on the server side, the same thing. The controller is our front end. We're going to interact with the controller, and we want to delegate. We want to keep the controller very focused. Just validate whatever you get the parameters, get the body of the request, and just delegate all of our business logic to a service. So I'm going to create a service, nest generate service, and I'm going to call it to-dos. Like you expected, because I choose a different name, it created a different folder. I'm going to remove it. Nest generate tasks. Now it's going to target the same folder. So I've got a controller, a module, and a service. So I've got the complete flow, all the components I need in order to demonstrate a flow. So inside my controller, I can inject the service. Let's call it, let's do a private task service. The type is going to be task service. And here, and I can use it, this task service get find all. I'm going to go to my task service, implement find all, return an empty array for now. And on my module, I just need to make sure that on the providers, I'm declaring the task service. Just want to check the app module because, yeah, I created this to-do service before. And I remove it. Let's launch the server. Let's see if we got enough time. Yeah, we've got enough time. All right. Back here, we've got tasks. Something went really wrong with this, or not. App controller, task module, task controller. I'm going to get all, and this one just return me nothing. Hopefully, that was my mistake, but it seems like I messed with something. Yeah, I messed with something. I'm going to find it soon, don't worry. Provider, stack service, task controller, the module is task module, the app module, take the task module, the app controller, the app service. I don't see any issues. Just gonna. Don't worry, I've got a backup. I'm not gonna waste your time. All right, I generated an error. We're gonna fix it. I'll show you exactly how I'm gonna fix it. Actually, what? Which make perfect sense. Where's TypeScript when we need it? Where's my compile time error? Silence. Silence. Well, what's going on here? That's the app service. You should know.
Compilation doesn't always catch all that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But look, yeah. It actually it tell me that if I've got to get a low on my app service. Also, my apps. Oh. Yeah. Let's remove this one. We don't care about the app controller right now. We care about a task controller and find all. And I'm not returning anything, and that was the problem. But it's easy to blame TypeScript. Cool. We've got a controller, service, and a module. Let's move forward. Let's connect this thing to the database. Who heard about a technique, a pattern called ORM? Raise your hand. A lot of you. So for those who haven't heard about it, ORM is a technique that enables you to map objects into database rows, like keeping it very high level. Basically, when you work in your app, you're working against objects, and all the communication with the database is encapsulated. So you just need to take care about creating instances, saving those instances, update those instances, and the database is being managed by the framework. Because NestJS is written with TypeScript, one of the ORMs that fits very well to this framework called Type ORM. Now, I'm not going to use the Type ORM directly. I'm going to use another difference from Angular. It's got great documentations right from the start. Yeah, I'm going to use a built-in module that's called NestJS Type ORM. They're just going to wrap Type ORM for me. So let's copy this line of code. Instead of MySQL, I'm going to use another relational database called Postgres. That's probably not the right node module. Always forget. Yeah, it works. All right. Now, in Angular, one of the best things that when you're working with third parties Angular modules and features, we know that it's going to be very easy to integrate it. You're probably going to get a module. You need to import this module, and then you've got a bunch of services that you can inject. It sounds pretty much familiar. So I'm expecting the same behavior, the same pattern, the same API, the same easiness to use a third-party extension like Type ORM. So I'm going to hit my app module first, and I'm going to import from NestJS Type ORM. I'm going to import the Type ORM module. And then I'm going to import this module. And if you worked with the router or any other Angular modules, how many of you familiar with the pattern of creating the module dynamically for the root module and for a feature module, like for root and for child? You heard about it? Just few of you. All right. Actually, from this meetup in the AngularNYC channel, I think there is a YouTube talk where I demonstrate how to write and implement this feature. So check out the YouTube channel and just scroll back. I did a live demo. What is this for root and for child and for feature, and how you can leverage this. So type ORM for root. It's just a static method that enabled me to configure the module. This is a very Angular thing. So right here I can drop an object and I can pass configuration. I'm not going to waste our time with configuration, so I've got some snippets that I prepared because this is not like part of the live demo. So right here, I'm just going to drop an object with configuration. What's the name of the database, what's the port, what's my username, and so on. All right? Now, personally, I'm pretty much familiar and feel comfortable with configuring everything inside a module. But if you don't feel comfortable with this, you can always just take it out, go to the root of your project. I'm going to create, not under SRC, I'm going to create a ORM config.json, and I'm just going to drop it here, and it's going to be picked up by the framework. So theoretically, I'm connected to the database. We don't know it for sure because we haven't tried to run any code. So let's give it a try. So like I said before, the concept of working with an ORM means that for every entity that we've got on the database, we create an object. This object is gonna be mapped into the database. So if I want to work with this ORM, first I need to create an object that represents an entity on my database. I'm gonna create a task entity because I want to create a table of tasks, and I want to be able to edit tasks and query tasks. So within the tasks folder, I'm going to create a file called task entity. It's going to be simple as creating a class called task, and then just defining some fields on this. For example, I want to have an ID, which is database. I want the database to manage a unique ID for me. I'm going to have a description. The type going to be string. I don't know, is completed. The type going to be Boolean. So it's all started with just a simple class, and now I'm going to decorate this class. This is an entity. I want it to be mapped to the database, all right? And from Nest type ORM, I'm gonna import some more stuff like auto, or like generated. Oh, excuse me, that's from type ORM, like. Generated primary generated column, because I want the ID to be generated by the database. Primary generated column. Generate this automatically for me. This is just a column. I don't need to specify any type unless I wanna specify a very specific type in my database. For example, TypeScript, consider this as a string, but on my database I've got two types. I've got a plain string and I've got text. Text can contain more chars. So for this example, I'm just going to map it to a text on my database. Is completed can be just colon. And we're done. This object, which is going to be managed by Nest and type ORM, going to create a row on my table, going to enable me to save, update, to do whatever I like. It's going to be instantiated, it's going to be destroyed. We don't need to care about it. It's going to pick it up because in our config, our ORM config, we just mentioned, where did I put my ORM config? Why did it on the, here it is. You see this line? Just pick up all of my entities for my project. Every file that's going to have like .entity, whatever it's a TS or JS, just pick it up and load it. Like auto-load all of my entities. But being practical, every time you want to create another entity in your database, that's exactly what you need to do. Read the API, create a simple class, annotate it, all right? If you want it to be generated automatically, if you want to map it to different types, all right? And you've got some more options, not too much. Basically, each property mapped to a row in your database. Cool? Nice. Look at our feature. We've got a controller, simple class, decorated with the controller, dependency injection. We've got a service, plain JavaScript object, right? You don't need to map it to anything because it's just, just a service. We've got an entity, which is a spatial class, but still a class. So now we can interact with the database. It represents a row in the database. And we wrapped everything inside a Nest module. So we've got like a feature that we can plug wherever we like. Here on my task module, I'm going to import type ORM module. But this time, it's going to be for child, for feature. The feature that I'm working with, and where is Yaakov? Now Yaakov is going to be proud of me. I'm going to represent a task. I've already got a task entity. The only missing part is let's define how a task actually looks like, which is very similar to an entity. And you see what I'm talking about. I'm going to duplicate this entire file. I'm going to paste it here. It doesn't need to be decorated, so I don't need this. I just want to describe the type. This is how a task looks like. This is an interface for a task. You don't deal with this object, but it gives you a structure. Let's wire up everything together, see a working example, hear some questions, and see where we're heading. Let's start. On my module, type ORM, the feature that I'm working with currently, I'm working with these types. I'm working with tasks. So I'm going to pass tasks. If you ever work with NGRX, same API. Next, on my task service, now I can be more typed. So for example, find all, going to return me a task array. And find one, going to return me a single task, like this. And find one, going to get an ID. I'm going to pass an ID because I want to get a single task. And so on, so on. Create, going to get a task which looks like this. And then I'm going to create a task. I've got types. All right? Make sense up until now? All right? Something missing. Now I want to actually create something on the database. I want to keep it simple. I want to keep the ORM simple. Up until what now we just build simple classes, but it's very powerful. I'm going to use a pattern called the repository pattern. The repository pattern means that my task service that I wanted to communicate with the database, I'm going to create a constructor. I'm going to use a special decorator, inject repository. It's not import, yeah. Inject repository. Give me the repository that's related to a task. Dependency injection. I'm going to call it tasks repository. The type is going to be repository of tasks, generics. It's going to be private. It can be read-only. And that's it. Now I injected to this class basically a connection. Right now I can come right here to find all and do something like this. This task repository find, and let's return it. It shouted at me because two things. First, it's a promise, all right? So I can't just go ahead and ignore it. If I want to get fancy, I can say this is an async function, and here I'm just going to wait. And second, I've got a type issue because I messed up with something. All right? Let's give it a try. Let's see if we can get anything. Let's see if I'm going to run this code, I'm expect a table to be created on the database and return me an empty array because there's nothing. Make sense? Make sense? Controller get all will return this task services find all, and hopefully everything will work as expected, unless you find a bug.
What time is the database structure actually created? Is it on the server?
Right now. I'm going to run the server for the first time. It's going to create tables, and from this time on, it's just going to update the tables if there's any change. But if you want to work in production mode, you work with migrations. This is out of scope of this talk, but if you're familiar with the concept of migrations, you're writing the changes that you want to apply to the database in files, commands that you can revert. But if you like, we can talk about it if you're going to hang out after the meetup. Because right now, it's very important to me to show you the entire demo, and like that's a lot of stuff. But I just want you to get familiar with this, and hopefully get excited about it. npm start. We've got an error. That's the error. Nest API, config path, index.ts, TSC error, unable to compile, return type of an async. Yeah, sometimes it's happened with live demos. So I'm going to fall back to my snippets. I'm going to take my task entities, the complete example. It's not going to get like too much fancy. I just added this. Created date column because I want the database to automatically create a date when I create it, when I insert this file into the database. And there's a lot of other fancy stuff like create and update it and stuff like this. But the entity stays the same, all right? I'm going to use my snippet for the controller for the same reasons, lack of time, and I don't want to mess with live coding too much. Look at this controller. I'm going to walk with you line by line. Don't worry. Controller of tasks. I'm going to inject the task service. All right? Here I've got a GET request map to find all. I want to get a query. Question mark, query, because I can limit the results. Here I'm just going to console log. This action return all tasks, and this is the query. All right? I'm going to go to this task service and find all. Next one, get ID. the path is going to look like this, tasks and an ID. When I hit this method, I'm injecting the route params, so I can grab the actual ID. And here I can go to my service and return a task with this ID. Next, this one is interesting. This is the post. When you hit my controller with a post request, I'm going to get from the body, I'm going to grab the task. I'm going to grab the task. Wait a second. Oh, yeah, no. Is it possible to get like 5 minutes to complete it, or it's like too much? 5 minutes is my max? Sorry. Usually I know that like it's 8:30, that's okay, but if it's like hard limits, so. All right. I make it quick, guys. You know what? Let's make it real quick. I think we got an idea of this. Do you agree with me? I mean, classes, annotation, I mean, we can try to get it work like on a live demo, but it can take us too much time. So I'm going to remove all of this. You can read the documents. I'm just going to leave for now the most simple example, because I want to show you how the database actually works, all right? So let's just make sure we've got an entity, we've got a query. It seems like we've got everything in place, all but the service. All right. Oh, JavaScript, yeah. So it was all about a typo. It's still JavaScript, like a robust, fancy framework TypeScript, but it's still JavaScript. You got a typo, and everything just, yeah. All right. So let's leave it like this: a task module, an ORM, an entity, and my controller, task controller. Let's give it a try. It looks okay. It feels like after it launched. No repository task was found. Looks like the entity is not registered in the current default connection. It just looks like I made a mess. But the good news that I've got this demo because I coded it before the meetup. I've got it up and running. So unfortunately, you won't be able to actually see it right here on the live demo up and running. So you just need to take my word on this because I'm under pressure. So let's try to summarize anyway. And you'll excuse me for this. NestJS, the same concept as Angular, same patterns, all right? Actually, we can learn from this live coding that didn't get that well that the same issues that we can get with Angular, if you miss something in the configuration, can cost you some time. So there are like, pros and cons, like Angular. The concept is the same. I built a production server with this. It was a nice experience. I don't think I recommend it right now to build like huge project just because I haven't tried it by myself. So that's the only reason. I'm not recommending something that I haven't tried. I think you should give it a shot. For sure, if you try to build your first feature, which is Fullstack, you're building some kind of a prototype, you want to learn, you want to get into the server side, I think it's going to be a nice starter for you because you already know Angular, so the API is friendly and the concept is friendly, and it works. Although my live demo kind of failed, but it's probably my fault. I think that basically, basically that's it. So if you want to hang out after the meetup, I'm gonna be here because where? Oh yeah, Daniel gonna give you all the details. Thank you anyway. If you'd like to talk about Nest, you're more than welcome to keep in touch via email, Twitter, or just come by and give you other ways to connect me. Thank you.